Good morning, everyone. I am tasked to tackle about the later approaches to implicature. So it is in the Neo-Gracian theory. Reorganize the maxims. Brevity is encouraged by quantity 2 relation and manner 3. Verbosity is encouraged by quantity 1 relation and manner 1 to 2. Speakers must strike a balance. Q negative and R negative implicature. Levinson, Q negative, I negative, and M negative implicature. Application is the lexical pragmatics. Q and R implicature. Two opposing principles. The Q principles say as much as you can given R. The R principles say no more than you must given Q. Reorganization. The Q principle maps into Grice's first submaxim of quantity. The R principle maps into Grice's second submaxim of quantity, relation, and manner. Quality is considered a kind of supermaxim, assumed to operate above the level of Q and R and without which the system cannot function. So for the continuation of Q and R implicature, here are some examples of Q implicatures. I love most Beatles songs. I don't love all Beatles songs. Jeanette likes Sylvester. Jeanette doesn't love Sylvester. Steve will register for biology or chemistry. Steve won't register for both biology and chemistry. Mary's jacket is light red. Mary's jacket isn't pink. The Q principle is a lower bounding. Principle puts a lower limit on what should be said. Say no less than this. It induces upper bounding. Implicatures hearer can infer that anything beyond what is said doesn't hold. Examples of are implicatures. John was able to fix the broken hinge. John fixed the broken hinge. I broke a fingernail. I broke one of my own fingernails. I need a drink. I need an alcoholic drink. Kathy and Cheryl sang the national anthem. Kathy and Cheryl sang the national anthem together. The R principle is an upper bounding. Principle puts an upper limit what should be said. Say no more than necessary. It induces lower bounding. Implicatures hearer can infer that what has been said represents merely the lower limit of what holds. The Q principle is a hearer-based principle. The more that is explicitly said, the easier it is for the hearer to process the message. The R principle or the Q and R implicature is some kind of balance that must be struck. How do we know which principle is at work in any given case? First is the Horn division of pragmatics labor. An unmarked adherence licenses an R reference to the unarmed situation. An unarmed impression is the default, usual, or expected. Replacing unmarked adherences with marked adherences eliminates the R inference, and instead may license a Q inference. A fingernail was broken by me. It was in one of my own fingernails. Gordon killed the defender. Gordon caused the intruder to die. The use of the unmarked expression killed induces an R implicature that the killing happened in the unmarked default way. The division of pragmatic labor suggested that the use of mark expression Q implicates a mark meaning. Q, I, and M implicature. Levinson's system is based on three heuristics for adherence interpretation. The Q heuristic wasn't it said isn't. The I heuristic, what is simply described, is stereotypically exemplified. The M heuristic, a mark message, indicates a mark situation. Corresponding to each heuristic is a more flesh out speaker's maxim and hearer's corollary. Q principle. Do not provide a statement that is informationally weaker than your knowledge of the world allows, unless providing an informationally stronger statement would contravene the I principle. Specifically, select the informationally strongest paradigmatic alterate that is consistent with the facts. Hearer's corollary assume that the speaker made the strongest statement consistent with their knowledge. The Q heuristic is related to Gray's first submaxim of quantity and Horn's Q principle. The heuristic is based on the notion of contrast set, a set of adherences that the speaker could have made. Scales in an ordered set. The I heuristic is related to Atlas and Levenson's 1981 principle of informativeness and is related to Gray's second submaxim of quantity and Horn's R principle. Induces an inference to the stereotypical situation. The M heuristic is related to Gray's maxim of manner. The I and M heuristics are in opposition. Horn's Q principle does the work of both Levenson's Q heuristic and his M heuristic. The Q heuristic appeals to a contrast set of semantically distinct expressions. For example, is the most, not all, like, not love, or not both. The M heuristic assumes a contrast set of formally distinct expressions that are semantically similar. For example, is the light red, not pink, caused to die, killed indirectly. Both Horn's and Levinson systems rely on a tension between a speaker-based principle and a hearer-based principle. Horn's system captures a generalization concerning the source of two different types of inferences. The inference to the mark situation and inference to the non-applicability of what hasn't been uttered. Horn's system incorporates an appealing parallelism between two principles. Levinson's system incorporates a potentially useful distinction between formal and semantic contrast. Let's move on to the lexical pragmatics. Kill means cause to die, but the pragmatic meaning includes intentionality and directness of causation. A similar account can be given of other causes of auto-hyponymy. I need a drink. The actor just handed a new role. I prefer photos in color. I had a slice of bread with my Luna. I need to mow the grass. Over time, a lexical form becomes more and more associated with the R affected meaning. Corn mean grain in general, now means maize, wheat, oats. Lexical pragmatics is a scholar Implicatures become generalized over time. The exclusive sense is now generally associated with or. Languages avoid synonymy and homonymy. Avoid synonymy is a speaker base or R base principle. Avoid homonymy is a hearer base or the Q base principle. Lexical blocking. Once the language is a word like typist, it will tend not to develop typer. If the language does not develop a new word based on morphological derivation, it will be associated with a distinct meaning. Refrigerant versus refrigerator. Cooker versus cook. Universal, particular, positive, negative. A cases entail their corresponding I cases and E cases entail their corresponding O cases. Everyone will live. Someone will live. Nobody will live. Not everyone will live. I always feel like crying. I sometimes feel like crying. Contraries can both be true. All dogs are friendly. No dogs are friendly. Contradictories can both be true and can both be false. Some dogs are friendly. No dogs are friendly. Subcontraries can both be false. Some dogs are friendly. Not all dogs are friendly. Lexical pragmatics, the square of opposition captures some interesting regularities about language and about the relationship among entailments, contradictions, and implicatures. It also captures interesting constraints on lexicalization. When language contains lexical items corresponding to the A, I, and E corners, they tend not to lexicalize the O corner. All dogs, some dogs, no dogs, null dogs. O is the exact negation of A, and I is the exact negation of E. I implicates the negation of A, and O implicates the negation of E. But the negation of E is equivalent to I, and the negation of A is equivalent to O. Thus, loosely speaking, the subcontraries implicate each other. There is thus no need to lexicalize both I and O, and since O is marked relative to I is chosen. The principle of relevance. But first, what is relevance theory? Relevance is central to human cognition. Gives up the notion of CP and the maxims. People don't calculate the meaning. They just cognize. Doesn't seek to reduce the maxims to opposing forces, but to propose a singular role for relevance, which itself contains opposing forces. The tension between cognitive effort and cognitive effects. Proposes an account of what goes on in the mind of a single participant in a conversation rather than a theory of how the participants view each other as interacting. Can serve as the basis for constructing testable hypotheses about how hearers will react to the different inputs. So, what is the principle of relevance? The communicative principle of relevance states that every ostensive stimulus conveys a presumption of its own relevance. Ostensive stimulus, a stimulus intended to convey meaning. The cognitive principle of relevance. Human cognition tends to be geared to the maximization of relevance. What the speaker intends to communicate is sufficiently relevant so as to be worth processing. This is the most relevant communication that the speaker could have used to convey the intended meaning. Relevance is defined in terms of positive cognitive effects. Changes in how one sees the world. One major type of positive cognitive effect is a contextual implication, or the conversational implicature. But a contextual implication is any positive cognitive effect that is derived from the interaction of the context, the input, and the search for that input's relevance. The hearer's task is to follow the path of least effort. In identifying contextual implications and calculating cognitive effects until the expectation of relevance has been adequately met. The higher the processing cost, the lower the relevance. The greater positive cognitive effects, the higher the relevance. There is a tension and trade off here. There is an issue of how effect and cost can be measured. Unlike Neo Gracie Curie, here the tension is within an individual. So now let's move on to the explicature and implicature. Relevance theory changes the way that what is said is related to what is implicated. Pragmatic interference, guided by the principle of relevance, goes into determining the truth evaluatable proposition. This is called explicature. After a while, he raised his head. That is according to Rond 1957. After something between a few minutes and several minutes, Francisco of Ancona lifted his own physical head off the surface it had been resting upon. Implications for the semantics or pragmatics boundary, the Neo-Gracian Curie.